everybody. It's Jerri Ward with I Object, Justice Examined. And again, today I have a great show. Let me tell you what I'm going to do today. I'm going to have some guests who are going to be talking about eminent domain and Kelo. And of course, that's not really in the news right now, but a great new book has come out called Bulldozed, Kelo, Eminent Domain, and the American Lust for Land by Carla T. So I'm going to be talking to her about that book, and also I'm going to have a family member from one of the families who's being impacted by that right as I speak. But first of all, I'm going to welcome back my monthly guest, Alana Mercer. Alana is the great classical liberal writer and thinker who wrote the book Broadsides, One Woman's Clash with a Corrupt Culture, which is a great book, by the way. I highly recommend it. She writes a weekly column, which appears in WorldNet Daily on Fridays, so look for her column tomorrow. Maybe she'll give us a little hint of what it'll be about today. And her website is at alanamercer.com, and she is a very prolific writer, both on her blog and also out there in the media with regard to columns and whatnot. So, Alana, welcome back.
Hi, Jerry. Good to speak to you.
Good to speak to you, too. Well, I asked you today to talk about last week's column that you had at WorldNet Daily and also at your site, alanamercer.com. And it had a very interesting title and it was a very timely title. It's sort of a tongue-in-cheek double entendre column called Stop Stimulating in Public.
Yeah, well, I thought actually I'd be censored because you know how conservative WorldNet Daily is, because I did ask the politicians to stop groping obscenely for their stimulus packages. And all I could think of, I guess I have a very vivid imagination, was these crotch-grabbing, lewd rappers. And certainly the stimulus package would do as good as those gesturing non-musicians to get us out of the economic bind we're in.
Well, I have to tell you that the presuppositions of this stimulus package, insofar as values are concerned, those values are very similar to decadent rappers because it does not exactly favor savings, work, and solvency, does it?
Well, I think I'd still favor the rappers because they still go out into a very culturally corrupt market and earn their keep.
Well,
so
yeah,
I'd have to favor the rappers over the politicians.
Well, yes, because at least they're making their own money instead of taking other people's money and giving it to people who have not even been paid into the tax system, because my understanding is that this rebate plan that they have is going to include those who have not even paid into the tax system.
Well, of course, and obviously because we're bankrupt, the government is bankrupt, it's just moving money around, or moving debt, rather. I mean, how is this going to materialize? Basically, we're, these corrupt politicians vying for votes are suggesting a Critten's cure-all. I mean, we are going to correct what they've brought on by doing the same, more of the same, by spending and credit expansion. Because how is this package going to materialize, these checks, basically by borrowing from China or printing funny money, right?
Exactly. This will do nothing to help capital formation, and what we need right now is capital formation. And I tell you what I compare this to. This is like a financially dysfunctional family that finds itself in the hole, who instead of bucking up and cutting spending and doing all the things, the traditional things that are valued, such as thrift and savings, instead they go out and give 5 new credit cards, and then they go to the mall and get designer clothes, which they proceed to wear to the swank party they hold for all their friends.
Yeah,
That's what I compare it to.
Whatever happened to sucking it up, the good old American way?
Well, I don't think you're going to find a government, whether Republican or Democrat, that's going to tell everybody to suck it up in an election year. That's just the reality of it.
But I bet you our Chinese formidable rivals would give us a hint or two, because they save up to 40% of their GDP.
Well, it's interesting you bring up the Chinese, because lately I've been listening to Laura Ingraham, and she's been sounding the alarm about how the Chinese could eclipse us as a financial power. And you wrote a little bit about what the Chinese were doing on your blog following your last column. Why don't you tell
sure, but
us what they're doing?
I just have to interject there, as usual. These Republican cheerleaders are usually xenophobes, and they're always behind the times, because China has certainly been at it for quite a while. They do have a phenomenal growth rate, and we know that, 70% per annum. And although our nosy politicians don't keep reminding them they have such a democracy deficit, they don't seem to believe in personal national debt. And as any Austrian economist will tell you, that the strength of a society really is founded on the degree to which the individuals save and accumulate capital and then invest it. That's basically the lifeblood of a healthy economy.
And that's essentially what the Chinese are doing, which is why we're able to borrow money from them in order to conduct our affairs, including the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And you can bet that these rebates that are going to be coming back to the people aren't going to be from money that we already have. It's going to be from borrowing.
Well, we don't have money. Basically, the American government is broke, which is why I don't want to get off track here, but which is why I really felt like slapping McCain and his smirking buddy there, although I prefer Mitt to McCain. But when Ron Paul, our friend Ron Paul, attempted to explain to them that we are bankrupt.
Oh yeah, those two just get smirks on their face instead of listening to reality. I mean, it's like we're in denial. I mean, McCain, he's admitted that he doesn't understand economics, and I got to tell you, when Romney goes up to Michigan and promises a Keynesian type bailout plan for the auto industry, you have to wonder whether wherever he got his business degree, if it taught him any true economics.
Well, I do respect him a little bit more because he has actually turned business around, right?
Yes.
And McCain McCain hasn't done anything of the sort.
Well, I agree, and that the fact that he does obviously know a lot more about it than McCain makes me wonder why he was talking Keynesian economics up there in Michigan. What do you think?
Well, I think that Keynesian economics is what the government has certainly adopted. I think even Keynes gave up on it, that you could deficit spend yourself into a recovery. That's in essence what I'm not an economist, but that's in essence my understanding of a system even Keynes gave up on. Well,
yeah, because it didn't work, and
it's unethical, of course.
Oh, it is.
It's unethical, and that's essentially the impetus of the objection of natural rights-based libertarians. I mean, spending what you don't have is defrauding someone else, isn't it?
Well, it is. And inflating the dollar so that it loses value is also defrauding someone else. And we have a whole system that's built on inflation. I mean, we have easy credit, so we borrow money, and then we pay it back. We pay back dollars that are less or worth less. So we all benefit from inflation in a very immoral way, and we all need to go back to our Bibles for the biblical wisdom in Proverbs and other books that talk about not going into debt and honest and just weights and measures.
Absolutely, but I would argue that the people do not benefit from inflation. It's the people close to what I call the media, military, industrial, congressional complex. These are the people close to the new money that do benefit from the counterfeited cash, in the basements of government. But the people don't benefit.
No, we're actually hurt, but creditors, debtors benefit a lot more than creditors because, many creditors, because they're paid back with money that's worth less. But anyway, overall, the people suffer. Well, Ilana, why don't you give us a little hint of what your next column is going to be tomorrow?
Well, the next column I think you will like especially. It's Thugs Unite at the UN again. So please check it out on my website tonight and at worldnetdaily.com.
Well, thank you again for being with me, and I will be talking to you next month.
Speak to you soon, my dear. Bye.
All right. Thanks. So now John's just told me that my guests are on the line. And let me do an introduction for them. And again, we're going to talk about eminent domain and the book, Bulldozed, Kilo, Eminent Domain, and the American Lust for Land, which was written by one of my guests, Carla T. Main. And let me tell you a little bit about her. She was a practicing attorney in New York, and until 2005, she was the associate editor of the National Law Journal, where she edited the opinion page of the paper and wrote a column on law and society. Her writing has appeared in the Wall Street Journal, Policy Review, National Review, The American Lawyer, and the New York Sun, among other publications. And also accompanying her is my other guest, Wright Gore III, who is a fellow Texan. He lives in the Lake Jackson area and has a business in Freeport, Texas. He's the member of a quintessential American family. His grandfather picked himself up by the bootstrap, and together with his son and his grandson, built a thriving business called Western Seafood in Freeport, Texas. And that business is being carried on today. But the business is at risk because of the use of eminent domain by the city of Freeport, which intends to give part of the land, a very essential part of that land, to a developer. Carla and Wright, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Glad to be here.
Good. I'm really excited about this show because the Kilo decision just really ignited disgust in me. And in fact, about 2 years ago, I was a guest host on one of the Wright Talk shows and got to interview Wright at that time, right after the Kilo decision. And Wright's story has just stuck with me. But Carla, let me start with you because you actually, when you practiced law in New York, you found yourself on the other side of eminent domain cases from the property owners. And I thought that was quite interesting. What led you to go from there to write this book?
Well, I was a very young lawyer, and we were representing large government corporations that were condemning land to build schools in very poor neighborhoods. And those were, sort of classic public use condemnations. They were not economic development takings of the sort that I wrote about in Bulldozed. But back in those days, under the New York eminent domain proceedings law, we used to hold public hearings. And I would go into these neighborhoods, very poor neighborhoods, and hold these hearings. And it's kind of an indication of how pro forma those hearings were, that, I was the junior associate, the low man on the totem pole, and they would send me to conduct these hearings because everybody knew that the hearings were just sort of a formality. And businessmen whose businesses were being condemned would come forward at these hearings and literally plead with us not to destroy their life's work. And I never forgot those hearings. They made a tremendous impression on me because they really helped me to understand the impact that eminent domain has on the lives of individuals and the power that the government has over people's lives. And I came to understand what eminent domain really means. And so, later on, as I became more aware of these sorts of economic development takings, I looked at them through a different kind of lens because it seemed to me that unless there was a tremendous necessity, the government had to think very carefully before putting people through that.
Well, in your book, even though you also discussed the people behind the Pole Town and Kilo decisions, you chose to really focus on Wright Gore's family and Western Seafood. What was it about that story that caused you to choose to focus on it when you wrote the book?
Well, I wanted to tell the story of one family and one town because I wanted the reader to be able to relate to the story of just, an average American family. It's like you noted when you introduced us that, that Wright's grandfather, wonderful man, Wright Winston Gore Sr., who was known as Pappy to his family, he lived the American dream. He was the quintessential self-made American man. He was born into poverty. He pulled himself up from a very poor childhood, and by virtue of his native intelligence, he wasn't able to have a formal education, but he had tremendous native intelligence, and he was just a natural-born entrepreneur. He founded a business, and he was very successful, and his sons were very successful at running that business. And I wanted to sort of, tell the history of eminent domain and how the Kalo case came about and how it affects the lives of individuals and also how it affects a community when these kinds of takings occur. And I wanted the reader to be able to see that through the eyes of one American family. So that's why I wanted to write about the Gores.
And I think you chose a great story and a great family to write this about. And I want to get you in here a little bit because what I'd like you to tell the folks, I'd kind of like you to set the stage about what Western Seafood is. Tell us a little bit about Pappy and just set the stage for us, and then we'll go into what the city of Freeport is trying to do to you.
Well, my family has been in business for about 57 years on the banks of the old Brazos River in Freeport. And it's certainly not a glamorous business. It's a stinky, smelly, hard scrapple business, shrimping. And my grandfather, he purchased this business and literally sold his house in order to make a down payment on this business. And he worked from, as Carla wrote in the book, from can till can't. And when my father graduated from school, he joined the business as well. And I've been helping out over the past several years, and it's just a family business. We have about 56 people working down there on the docks, and never asked anything from the government. And all of a sudden, one day, the government informs us that they want to give our property to somebody they like more than us, someone who had curried favor and promised them all sorts of things, apparently. And that's when we found ourselves on the business end of a gun. We didn't even have the opportunities of a public hearing or things like that. We were simply told one day, you sell us your property or essentially your business for about $260,000, something you've been working at for 56 some odd years, or we're going to take it from you forcibly.
Yeah, let's set the stage a little further here. Western Seafood, you guys buy the shrimp from the shrimpers, and then I guess you process it there on the banks of the Brazos. Is that right?
Western Seafood primarily is in the business of purchasing shrimp wholesale from independent boat owners. So it looks to this day very much like what you saw in Forrest Gump, the Bubba Gump Shrimp Company. It's not a glamorous business, but that's what it is. And so we would purchase these shrimp, and we would also provide all the other services and businesses that those independent boat owners needed, whether it was a loan to buy supplies, and the supplies themselves. It kind of operated as a company town, so to speak, for most of the time that we've been down there. And then these boats use diesel fuel in order to power the engines on the boats, and they typically require a lot of ice in order to keep the shrimp fresh. And so we provide that as well and keep the boats running in order, have a repair business on that. So it was a number of businesses that were all surrounded by what it took for independent boat owners to ply their trade.
And what they want to do is they want to take a very essential part of your property that would make it impossible for those shrimpers to offload their product. Isn't that the case?
Yes, the part that the entire business revolves around the unloading facility, which is where the boats tie up and unload their catch. And this is the part of the property that we were going to be denied and was going to be taken and given to our next-door neighbor on the waterfront.
Well, and we'll go into that a little bit more after the break, but essentially what they want to take would destroy the whole business and jobs for people. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back after the break to talk more about this.
Are you a business owner?